I had a moment there. I thought they were rolling out my coffin or something. I'm okay. All right. You never know what's around the corner. If I've met you, I'm Chip Freed, lead teaching pastor. I've had my granddaughter all weekend, so I'm totally miserable. We share everything together now, and she comes home from daycare with me once a week and always shares a cold. So my voice is a little scratchy, but put up with it. I just want to say from Terry and I, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much. I wrote that in my e-note if you get it, but for the cards, the gifts, the texts, the videos that we received last week, just celebrating 20 years. Terry and I feel so much a part of this family. We've been in this family for over half our marriage, and it was just a blessing. And I'm always a little uncomfortable with that kind of stuff, but I tell you what, you know, it's afterward, it's not without effect. I'm preaching today about grace and money, but grace, Paul said, has not been without effect in my life. So I just want to tell you, appreciate that. Some of the videos and cards led me to tears. Some of them led me to deep laughter because some of you know me well, and you wrote the snarkiest things. My kids, my son Matt coming in, how great did he do last week? Was he an amazing worship leader? I was sharing with Dre and Leah, because Dre and Leah and Justin before them and others poured into his life. He's a product of great leadership, and I didn't know he was coming. And when I was walking down the hall and looked up and saw him on the screen, my wife elbowed me, and I just checked my smartwatch to make sure I didn't go into AFib. I was so excited to see him. It was such a blessing. But afterwards, the kids were taking me to brunch, kind of celebrate the old man. And Tiana put on all the videos. There were an hour and 20 minutes of videos. You guys are insane, saying things. And some I'm just tearing up. And then John, Sherry, Brian, and John and Julie Gorman, they're one of the few that are actually still here when I got here 20 years ago, even still on planet Earth. But they're good friends and peers. And they did the snarkiest video. It was so funny. It was kind of like the OHIO. They did, hey, C is for this, H is for this, I is for this. They went through FRED, went through it. And then John Gorman just deadpanned. He said, Chip has the uncanny ability to make a 35-minute sermon feel like a 34-minute sermon. I laughed so hard I had to drive over the side of 480. I was gut laughing. So I want to tell you, you all blessed me. Your generosity toward us was just amazing. And it leads into this series where we're really talking about generosity. The title series is God and Money. I don't preach about money a lot. The reason I don't is, first off, your attendance goes down during those series enormously. The second reason is for people outside the church, and if you're online today and you're just checking us out, one of the suspicions is all the church wants is my money. That's why I never go. It's not true, and I hope we share that. Pastor Kurt is going to team teach with me in this series. Pastor Kurt is an ordained elder like I am, but his main day job, we're so blessed with him as our online pastor, but his day job is a financial advisor. He uses his faith and his training to help people do socially conscious investing and faith-based investing. So because he's such in that lane, it would be foolish of us not to hear him on this perspective. So I'm going to preach too. Kurt's going to preach too. Why are we talking about God and money? First off, Jesus talked a lot about money. They weren't shakedown sermons. He wouldn't even know what a prosperity preacher is. But he knew money has a claim on our lives. The Bible does not say money is the root of all evil. There's the culprit right there, the one that stole my heart. Hi, baby girl. It doesn't say money is the root of all evil. What it says is the love of money is the root of all evil. Augustine said sin is, it's not that we don't love, our loves get all disordered. And if the love of money is disordered, it can corrupt us. Jesus knew that. Do you know he talked about money more than he talked about prayer? He talked about money more than he talked about forgiveness. A third of his parables were about money because he knew it can have us around the throat. So that's the main reason. Second reason is money in the church. We have this story from the early church. Thank you so for that amazing reading. And we're talking about, yes, I'm here. I'm going to hear Papa all through this sermon. I'm going to be terribly distracted, but it's in the best way possible. But we're talking about money in our own church because today also We are beginning, you'll see them all throughout the area if you got my e-note. We're doing a 3-month capital campaign called Let There Be Light for our year-end giving. We've not done a capital campaign since our rebuild of this facility, a $3.5 million rebuild way back in 2013. That was the last time we did a major campaign. The good news is we're not talking $3.5 million. We're talking $224,000. But the beautiful thing of that campaign, we raised $3.5 million to restructure this facility that we're all benefiting in to, accommodate growth and everything else. And I go to conferences and I'll talk to churches and they, oh, you guys did a $3.5 million building project. How much did you borrow? How much debt do you have? I said, no, none. And they, no, wait a minute. How much did you have to borrow? How much debt do you have? None. They can't believe it. And people were so generous. We're in a situation right now we've been talking about in this year-end campaign with 3 specific goals. First, over the last quarter, we want to raise $200,000 of above and beyond giving. This isn't regular giving. What can we do above and beyond toward the end of the year, these 3 months? We have had, no bones about it, 2024, all the COVID stuff, everything has kind of caught up to us. We've had one of our worst financial years in recent memory. A big issue of that being totally transparent. We had 10 families that accounted for about $200,000 of giving of those 10 people. They relocated outside of Cleveland. 8 of them for job relocations, 2 for retirements. Don't worry, I wrote all of them and sent them this too. I did. My spiritual mentor used to say, he had a big mega church out in Texas, and they had this huge budget, and they were always talking about raising money. I said, Doc, you've got more in your budget than the 80 churches I oversee. This is way back in 2000. He said, yeah, Chip, but your best churches are always $1 short because they don't hoard money. They give it to what it was given for to ministry. And he would get up in front of his church, 10,000, he always say, this church has all the money it ever needs. The only problem is it's in all your pockets. And I always loved that. But, we had this loss. The good news is we've grown again numerically this year more than since any time. We're not back to our pre-COVID numbers. No church is in person, but we are online exponentially. If you're online, you're part of this movement. And you pray about this too. But where we've grown the most this year is in the millennial generation and in older Gen Z, which is college age and above. This is amazing. These younger generations are stepping up and leading. Our tailgate to kick off the year was all from our millennials. Our church council chair is a millennial. One of our lay leaders is a millennial. They are on our church council. They're on finance committee. They're doing everything. But if you know anything about the wealth gap in America, millennials and Gen Z do not have the disposable income that we baby boomers and builders do. So that's left us a hole. So we believe over these last 3 months, we can raise the $200,000 we need to start 2025 in a wholesome way. Our theme for Advent, for Christmas, is where there's night, there's light. That's John's gospel, okay? He doesn't talk about shepherds and wise men. He talks about light. And so this is called the Let There Be Light end of the year offering. 2 other components of this, where there's night in Greater Cleveland, is significantly in our homeless community. So our choir at 9 o'clock, they're leading an effort to raise $20,000 for what we're calling the Child of the Light offering as a component, an additional $20,000. It's going to go for 100 pairs of coats, boots, hats, gloves for the Lutheran Men's Shelter, and the other half for children's programming at Laura's home that they cannot do without us raising this money. So that's the $20,000 component of this. The choir is going to have concerts at Laura's home, at Breckenridge, here at Heritage. Their theme song is I Want to Walk as a Child of Light. So you can give to that. You can come and support and go out in the community of homeless as they go to extend the light. And lastly, our second mile, Be the Light, we're calling it, our second mile homeless ministry. You may not know this. We don't talk about it enough. We've shown videos here. But our second mile homeless ministry, the 3rd Sunday of every month, Garfield Memorial provides the meal at the Lutheran Men's Shelter. Go and provide that. On Saturdays, they come in the kitchen. Some of you have been involved in that. Make all the food, right? Also, 2 Fridays a month, Garfield sponsors the meal ministry through the Northeastern Ohio Coalition for the Homeless, where they have bag meals where trained leaders go out into the field and they go to homeless that will never go to a shelter. They won't go. They'll be on city benches, they'll be in the woods, and they know where to go. And we prepare those meals, okay? So you'll get the advertising. There'll be 4 Thursdays, 2 Sundays, where being the light during this holiday season, November, December, you can come in and be part of those meals. I challenged our Gen Xers here, our Gen Xers, I get those meals. Gen Zs, our younger generation who are really hungry to do something. I said, why don't you come out in October and start to lead us? And this is what happened last Thursday. Look at that team. They were out there. They're making the meals, man. Don't they look miserable? They just look miserable. They're like me with my granddaughter for the weekend, right? And so $4,000, these people have been funding it out of their pockets. I said, look, the church can do $4,000. So that's where we get to what we're calling 224 in 2024. I want you to pray about that. This is important. As we see in the scripture today, the early church always raised money for the Jerusalem church, the home church, and then they went out in the region of Judea. Then they went to Samaria, where nobody wants to go, like our homeless ministry. Then they went to the ends of the earth, like our African campus. But you've got to keep the home church strong. I said this morning, it's great the choir is doing this amazing ministry out there, but what if we can't afford a choir, right? So we believe we can do this, friends. This is thinking and praying about beyond your normal giving. What can we do? Why did Jesus talk so much about money? I turned to do some research the last few months on what is money doing to us, or the love of it, to us as a people, as a society. What's happening out there? So I looked at psychology. I looked at the political realm. Do you know they did a big survey in politics? They said, what's the number one influencer of how you vote? Do you know that the number one answer, I mean, it wasn't even a close second, is people say, I vote my wallet. I mean, not social issues, not spiritual issues, not how do we improve our community. I vote my wallet. Money can have us by the throat. So I turned to psychology and sociology. Here's just the things I found, all the articles and research I did. First off, marriages. Psychologists say that money disagreements are the top predictor of divorce, far ahead of infidelity, far ahead of communication problems. They said not just having financial struggles, but gaining money can be one of the things that hurt a marriage the most. It said competing visions for how to use windfalls can actually be more harmful than financial hardships to a marriage. One marriage counselor told of working with a couple in this article from which one of the spouses got a splashy new job, and they got into more money than they knew they printed in Washington. And all of a sudden, how to spend it became a source of contention and revealed major gaps in communication. The counselor that worked with them said this: all the joy and the excitement that they had at this new situation was completely wiped out. They were so focused on what they can do from a materialistic standpoint, they never focused on the accomplishment itself. It completely, this is their quote, rocked and ruined their marriage. Money and love of money can cripple us in our intimate unions. The issues on mental health. Do you know mental health communities say that issues around money are the largest contributors today? In the most wealthy nation in the history of the world, the number one largest contributors to anxiety, panic, and depression. It leads, they said, to mood changes, impaired memory, and even sleep problems. They call it a vicious cycle and a cyclical link between financial worries and mental health problems. And in this country of ours, 42% of Americans polled by the University of Chicago said that the number one stress in their life is money, leading to stress, leading to worry, leading to anxiety, right? Millennials reported 48% stress on that. Gen Xers, 46%. Mental health professionals say issues around money and people that experience stress on it lead people to be 20 times more likely to contemplate suicide. You know, you start seeing why Jesus talked about money so much. Stress around money in families, they said, child psychologists say, affect their children's hippocampus, a part of the brain that's important for learning and memory. And in today's day and age, how many of you know that in the last month, our stock market is just breaking records? Stock market has never done this good in the history of the stock market, which led the Wall Street Journal to write an article, and you read the Wall Street Journal, and the title of the article is this: your 401k is up, don't let it go to your head. That was their article, because it's doing so well. They said that when you financially, you know, your 401k is going up, and you feel it actually releases unhealthy dopamine in our brains. Finally, last article I read was The Atlantic, who picked up on the Wall Street Journal's information in the University of Chicago, and they wrote an article entitled, "Does Money Buy Happiness?" And they looked at families who have a net income of $25,000 to a net income of $250,000, and they measured their happiness on a psychological scale, and they said the difference between the two was indistinguishable. Indistinguishable. And they interviewed people whose income had quadrupled and that their happiness grew on a 100-point scale by like 0.5. They said it was less than the effect of a headache. Think about that. And their conclusion was, on the happiness scale, there is no practical effect of money at all. Maybe that's why Jesus talked about money so much, because it has us by the throat like that. Money and wealth and expressions, right? And so what I'm talking about today is money and grace. You don't hear those words used too often together. But in this story, that's what it's all about. If you don't remember anything from this sermon, money and grace, here's the moral of the story that was read to you in Scripture. Generosity is not about guilt. Generosity is about grace. Did you hear that early passage? They were all one in heart. Nobody viewed their possessions as their own. They held everything in common, and they preached the word of God boldly, and what? And great grace was upon them all, right? Paul said it this way: God's grace toward me has not been without effect. Generosity is the evidence of grace. It's the outward symbol that we've experienced grace, right? When we do weddings, we always have a little book, and we hope the best man didn't forget the rings. And we hold out the book and say, put the rings down. And we bless those rings. You know, we say, these rings are an outward expression of an inward love and grace. When we do baptisms here, and hopefully our baptisms on November 11th or 17th, if you've been considering that, when we do baptism, so what we say when we have our baptism meetings, the water is just an outward symbol of an inward grace. These early Christians were promiscuous with their money. They were radically generous. The culture around them wasn't. The Roman Empire was cruel. It was oppressive. It was a major disparity of wealth between the oligarchs and the poor, and they exploited it. And here these Christians were just radically giving to everyone in need, and the world was shocked. It was, if you read the testimonies of early Christian communities, when the plagues came and everybody left town, the Christians stayed behind, collected all their money, and provided relief for the very people who were persecuting them. And it made the world pay attention. And it says, if you read the Acts, it says, and they had the favor of all the people. Why? Because when the people looked at a community this generous, they knew if people were this generous in our society, in our world, it would be a better place. But none of us are. So how did they get this way? And because of that, they actually listened to the gospel testimony. And many of them became Christians themselves. This is a cycle that we see over and over and over. The grace of God, the gift of God in Jesus Christ for us, that grace revolutionizes our attitude toward money. It revolutionized, right? Look at them. No one claimed that any of their possessions was their own. I've been plagued by this commercial for the last 10 years. Thank God they don't play it as much as they used to. But it's just a lot of shouting, And people are shouting out of windows in apartment buildings. Everybody says, it's my money and I want it. See, we've all seen it. It's hell. It's just purgatory. But it is our story in America and in Western individualism. It's my money. And we get very touchy if anybody talks about it. Some of you are very touchy right now. I wish Chip would turn the page on this whole series, right? But they don't view it as that way. They don't say it's my money. They say it's God's money. And God loaned it to me. And God blessed me with it. My spiritual mentor used to get irritated with his kids. I remember when he was my college chaplain, I'd go over there and he'd get a little upset. And his wife, Irene, she was a saint. She would say, Coleman, just remember, they're not ours. They're just loaned to us. And that's true. Our families, our greatest gifts, my granddaughter, our money, they're God's. And they're on loan to us. And God asks us to be stewards of it, right? Christians didn't feel it was mine. And grace, what happens, it can change your bottom line. What's your bottom line? Grace can change that. We're doing the play rehearsals today. I love it for Christmas. Every Christmas, I watch all the Christmas movies. Thank you, baby. Not yet. All the Christmas, I told you this banner's going to go on. All the Christmas movies. My mom was born Christmas Day. I have to do it. One of the snarky things that happened too, in addition to that comment, somebody, I don't want to say his name, his initials are Bill Bidwell, snuck a Christmas ornament into my gift bag over there, and it was a Die Hard Christmas ornament. We do have a few pagans here that actually believe Die Hard is a Christmas movie. I've been diligently working for 12 years. I haven't had any conversions yet, but I'm fighting the good fight. So all of you that know that Die Hard's not a Christmas movie, pray with me for the transformation of souls. But one of the movies I always watch, have to watch it, various forms. It's been redone more than any other. Sometimes I reread the book. It's read more than Night Before Christmas. Is A Christmas Carol, Dickens' Christmas Carol. Ebenezer Scrooge, right? What is he? He's a miser. He's hoarding his money. It's my money. And guess what? Everybody around him is miserable. And the spirits come. You know the story, right? And they show him what a wretched, horrible life he's living, what a worthless life he's living, and he's making the whole world miserable. And at the very end, what happens? The ghost of Christmas future comes. They take him out to a lonely grave in a lonely cemetery, all vines on it, open grave, and Scrooge finds out what? It's his. He's doomed. And he's pushed into the grave, right? And he falls into what? Christmas morning. You know what that is? Grace. God doesn't deal with us with what we deserve. While we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Worthless, wretched, Christmas morning. And what happens to Scrooge? His whole bottom line changes. Remember, at the end of the movie, what is he? At the beginning, he's cackling over his money. At the end of the movie, he's still cackling. But what's he doing? Conspiring how to give it all away. It's changed, right? He's been revolutionized by it. And this is the thing, we can talk about how much grace means to us, but if we're always touchy and it's hard to be generous, Paul would say to us, has God's grace had effect? Did you say ow? Yeah, they're saying ow out there too. See, this is beautiful. This is just, I've never team taught with my granddaughter before. Pastor Kurt, you got big shoes to fill, buddy. So what does this mean? Grace giving versus guilt giving. When you've been revolutionized, it won't just change your attitude, it will change the process, right? Before you experience God's grace, you remember Scrooge, what? They came looking for him to give to charity. See, here's our attitudes about giving before grace. We are passive and then spontaneous, meaning we're passive. We're not looking for ways to give our money away. If you want to get my money, you got to come and ask me. You got to come and get me, right? And you got to guilt me. That's why the pictures of all the poor dogs that are outside, right? And the children who are starving. Do you know there was a scam for the hurricane relief? Here's the good news for you. I don't know if you know this. We were praying about the hurricane victims. There's a lot of bad things about being part of a denomination. There's some blessed things, just like there's bad non-denom and good non-denom. One of the beautiful things about being part of the Methodist Church, which we are, and we don't have to buy it, hook, line, sinker, everything. But what the Methodist Church does do right is missions. I don't know if I say this enough. 18% of every dollar you give to this church goes back out in world mission through our denomination. Do you know before the federal agents hit the ground for Hurricane Helene down there, our UMCOR workers of the Methodist Church were already on the ground, and you pay for that? After Hurricane Katrina, the Methodist Church built more houses in the state of Louisiana than the United States government. So I just say that to relieve your guilt. It's always like, what can we do? Hey, there's advanced specials. We're going to have our youth group maybe do some flood buckets. But 18% of everything, that's why I wake up in the morning with these things. It's so horrible. I was like, oh, thank God, I've already given to that, right? You have. And but there was a scam about Hurricane Helene. It's floating around social media. They uncovered it. But they had an AI-generated picture. You know what it was? Little boy in a boat with a dog, shivering in the rain. See, it's guilt. We're passive. We're not exploring. We're just back there. You want my money? Come guilt me. And then what happens? We're spontaneous. It hits our heartstrings and we go, gee, how much money do I have in my pocket? Or let me just write a check. We don't think about it. It's just spontaneous. But like Scrooge at the end, when you're blessed by grace, you are proactive and you're intentional, meaning you're looking, how can I be generous? You're looking for ways to be generous. You're not waiting for people to come knock on your door. You're thinking about, and when you're thinking about, guess what? Then you have to be intentional. You have to think about, what can I give and where am I at in my budget? And you're planning that out long in advance. I was really moved. I'm going to try to wrap this up. I was really moved by a story that Pastor Terry and I came across about an Indian state of Mizoram. I don't know if you know, Christianity is exploding in the world. It's dying, a kind of a quiet death in North America and Western Europe. It is growing 10 times the rate of the population in Africa, in China, in India, in Southern South America. So Christianity is not dead. Sometimes Christians are, but Christianity's not. But in India, it's grown. But back in India in 1914, when it was just a little flea on an elephant's back, in Mizoram, in this county in India, they wanted to figure out how can we give because they were in such poverty. And they came up with an expression called Bufai Tom. Bufai Tom. I'm going to share a Vimeo video with tomorrow's e-note. I can't play it here because it was like 7.5 minutes. I was led to tears watching this video because back in that poor community, how do we honor God? How can we give to the spread of the gospel? Bufai Tom, you know what it means? 1 cup of rice at a time. So what they did in that community, they would dish out their rice for their meals, and then they would take 1 cup and save it aside to give it to the church to be distributed so the church could sell the rice and use the money to spread the gospel. In 1914, there were so few of them. Do you know what all that rice sold by the church netted them? In US dollars, $1.50. But they put it into ministry. Fast forward to today, as Christianity has exploded in that community, they still do it. 1 cup of rice at a time. You know how much they collected last year from that? $1.5 million. You know what they do with it? They support all the local churches, all their budgets in Mizoram, and they sponsor 1,800 global missionaries around the world and give to missions radically by 1 cup of rice at a time. That affected me so much. One of the leaders said this. They said that if it's not our riches or our poverty that make us serve the Lord, but our willingness. See, their attitude, right? I've changed. So we meet so people say this, as long as we have something to eat every day, we have something to give to God every day. When we talk about this Bufai Tom, handful of rice, it's very humble. This service is done in the corner of a kitchen where nobody sees, but anybody can do. But God knows it and blesses it. I was talking to my wife about that, and I said, gee, we are regular givers. We give of our first fruits to the ministry. We set up online, so our automatically deducted each and every week. We're not rolling in dough over here, but we give our first fruits to God. But I said, honey, we got this campaign. What's going to be our cup of rice? And we were looking at, and I did some research, and I found out last Christmas, how much did we buy gifts? We don't buy gifts for each other. We stopped that long ago. We buy gifts for our kids. But I said, how much we buy for our children, our grandchild, our nieces and nephews? And it was $1,300. That's what I came up with, $1,300 in gifts. But my daughter-in-law says, if you buy any toys, they stay at your house. because it's shameful. But I said $1,300. So I said to my wife, okay, we'll start there. That'll be our cup of rice. I don't think our kids will die if they get a $50 present. We'll figure it out. So we commit. I told the business office, we're going to do $1,000 toward our Let There Be Light offering, $250 to our Child of Light, $50 to the 4,000 Gold Be the Light. And I committed that, and at first I thought, okay, that's a start. And then I felt, man, that's $1,300 on $225,000. And I'm praying, I hope we can do better than that. But then I got to thinking, we're a church of 1,200 people. I just did $1,000 to the $200,000 offering. If 199 people did the same, we're home. I gave $250 to the choir goal, and I thought, that's 1/80th. If 79 people did the same, we're home. I 50 to the 4,000, that's 1/80th. If 79 people do the same, we're home. And all of a sudden, you know what? That kind of felt kind of good. You know why? Because generosity changes the world. But you know where that change starts? In me, in you. This is what Jesus knew. This is why I talked about, so it would keep money and the love of it from getting around our throats. Because he knew if my grace toward you, which is the greatest act of generosity in the history of the world, if it triggers that spirit of generosity in you, you know what you're going to experience? Freedom. I felt free, just in a little act. And any time we do that, it changes us. We're not touchy about it. If you know the gospel's really hit you hard, you're not touchy about giving money. You know what you feel? Sad that you couldn't give more. And there's some people here. You can't give anything. You're trying to just make ends meet. I get it. You can give your time. You can go to a choir concert. You can come join the saints who are making food. You can be there. Some of you can do a lot better than $1,000. You can do $5,000, but here's the way I want you to do it. Say, I'm giving $1,000 for me, and I'm going to give $4,000 for my brothers and sisters who can't. See, if that kind of trigger of generosity happens, you know what happens? The whole group of those who believe were one heart and soul. No one claimed prime ownership. Everything was shared, and with great power, grace fell upon them all. That's my hope for this year. I hope individually, as we fight back against the way that money and wealth and possessions can just lay hold on us, it's our own way to fight individually against materialism and commercialization and consumerism, all those things that we get upset about during the holidays. It can begin to free our hearts. And if we collectively, for these 3 months, can meet this goal, and I believe we will, then you know what I want us to experience? Grace. Just like Scrooge will fall into Christmas Day and know the experience of how God can redeem lives, starting with our own. So we're going to come to the communion table now. We're going to ask those who are serving come. Pastor Terry's coming. If you guys come up. As we come to this table today, I want us to come remembering what? That God so loved that God gave. Everything God had, God's only Son. So when you come, this is a table of grace, of generosity. My body broken for you. My blood shed for you, right? So come with receiving that kind of act of generosity. And as you take that into yourself, pray, God, give me a generous heart. Make me radical this way. Because when you're free, you know what money becomes in your life? Money. That's all it is. It doesn't become this idol or things that lay hold on you and lead you into dark places. I pray for that freedom for me. I pray for it through this series. I pray for it for you. As we prepare to come to the table, and they'll be preparing, just take a look at this kind of closing message to prepare your hearts, and then come.
Why do we give? We give because it reminds us that all we have belongs to God in the first place. We